So today we're going to talk about whether you're trigger happy or trigger sad. Trigger happy or trigger sad. And this, I hope, is going to be a really great conversation. But before we do that, what we have to do is process the question that we had yesterday. So I would love to be able to do that. But I also want to remind you that when you come into the conversation, whether you do it live or you do it and watch it later, that if you have the opportunity in the comments, just say hello. Sometimes it's just nice to see your name, to see you do like Karen said and say good morning. We never know how a simple word might lift somebody's spirit and lift their day. All right. So I want to ask you this morning if any of you are creatures of habit. This whole idea that we're creatures of habit and we tend to do the same thing is really an important topic for us to discuss when we talk about this next week of the 21-day challenge. We started out with who are you really? But in this moment, we've got to see what has a tendency to derail us. And what derails us is often nothing new. It's the same things over and over, as are sometimes our reactions. So yesterday we asked you the question that when you don't get your way, what are the typical thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that you have? Because we really want to unpack this for you so that you're aware of it. And now we figure out how do we avoid it. So this morning, I really need you to interact with me because I want to break down the three components of that question and ask you to help me to understand what things typically people might think, feel, or do. And so the first part of that question for today is when you don't get your way, how do you typically think? What are the thoughts that go through your mind? You know, I'm always like, oh, you're doomed. Nothing ever turns out right for you. These are the voices in my head that are chattering at me and breaking down my spirit. So would you be so kind in the comments to give me some of those examples that you came up with? Because I really today want to unpack what you're experiencing so that others might learn from you. So right now, I don't have, Barbara's a creature of habit too, as is Charlene. So I don't have anyone who's given me the ways that you tend to think when things don't go your way. So I'm just going to expand the question because look, I'm gonna wait here all day if I have to. That how do you think? How do you feel? And how do you behave when things don't go your way? And again, one of the things that I find is that when we are vulnerable and not show our perfect selves, but show our real selves to one another, that's the opportunity for us to really learn, grow, and heal. And that's the whole goal of this program. One of the things that I shared yesterday with you is I tend to, when I don't get my way, there is a lot of anger that overcomes me. And it's something that I have to deal with, but I have to be aware of it. I actually asked a friend yesterday, like, when I don't get my way, what do you think? And she said, you complain a lot. And I didn't even realize that I was doing that. So it's so important to really be able to understand that. All right. So I do have Juan who says, I get quiet. And then Rosalind says, when things don't go my way, I tend to think, here we go again. There is always something going wrong. Yes. So here's this voice of confirmation, Rosalind, that's constantly like, yeah, see, I told you so. And again, isn't it interesting that if we had a friend who, if I was going through something, they'd be like, yeah, Denise, see, things always go wrong for you. I told you so. Nothing's ever going to work out. Most likely, I would decide that I'm going to get that friend out of my life because they weigh me down and they're negative. But what do we do when that friend's voice is our voice, the way that we're talking to ourselves? And so these are the reasons why we've got to be aware of what we think, feel, and how we think, feel, and act, because that's when we grab it and say, no, no more. Barbara says, I tend to shut down. Absolutely. People tend to shut down, they isolate, and all of those behaviors that are not good for us overall. And then I want to share one more, and that's Lisa. She says, when I don't get my way, I tend to pout in my disappointment. Oh my goodness. I hear you. I feel you. And shy away from hoping or believing for anything else. And isn't it interesting that we do that because we think we're going to save ourselves some pain, but actually that thought process causes us more pain. So in this process, we have to become clearly aware of who we are and what happens to us when we go through our troubles. Because what happens is our mind quickly goes to a place that is not good for us. And when it goes to that place, it continues to help us to spiral down. We talked about that the other day, and it's dragging us down. And our goal is to spiral up. I believe that life is about one conflict after another. Unfortunately, the only time that I'm going to have no conflict is when I'm with my creator. This is what I believe, because it's all about growing and learning. But you go through a conflict and you spiral up through it, meaning you get better and you learn, and it takes you to another level. And now you deal with the conflict on a higher level. And if you keep getting higher each time, you begin to make progress. And it's not perfection, it's progress. And when we can make progress, it's something to be really proud of. So I absolutely love that we do that. I see Janice says that she shuts down for a moment. And I think when I was doing my dissertation for my PhD, what I found is there's some really common things that we do as human beings. And one of those things is that when we are faced with loss and conflict and pain, we shut down very quickly. Being aware of that allows us to plan for something different. So in this process today, I say, are you trigger happy or trigger sad? I want to start thinking a little bit about some of these triggers, because what I've asked you is, how do you tend to behave? But the behavior comes from a trigger. And so we have to look at the trigger. Now, let me go back because I want to share with you that research really shows that it takes about 66 days to form a habit, right? So it takes about 66 days to form a habit. And then once that habit is formed, then all you need is something like a cue or a trigger, and it sets that habit off. You have performed that behavior, that thought, that feeling, and then we get some kind of reward. So it's this trigger or cue, the habit, and then a reward. So you're like, wait a minute, I'm thinking about I asked you about thoughts, feelings, and actions when you don't get your way, and how is there a reward to that? Well, if I don't get my way and the behavior is that I just pop off and say mean things to everybody around me, in the immediately after, I might feel a little bit better. I was like, I got that off my chest. I got to tell her what I thought, and that feels better. But what we find is the long-term consequence oftentimes is negative, because I've damaged the relationship, and I may even have damaged my reputation, because then people begin to see me as something that I don't want to be. So our goal here is to move you from that automatic thought, feeling, and reaction, which in the whole heart world we call thought, feeling, or behavior we call a reaction, to something that is more powerful. That's a response. It's a thought, feeling, or action, but it comes after careful consideration, even if it's just in a second, and it aligns with who we are and who we were created to be. With that in mind, what I want to show you really quickly is the conflict model that I'm speaking of, because it's I think one of the most powerful whole heart tools that we have. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see this tool. And as we do that, it is right here. This is the heart of what we call one of our self-coaching models. And so we use the heart because we feel like everything flows from the heart. And at the center of our hearts, oftentimes when we're in pain, is some kind of conflict, something that we wanted to happen that didn't, something that did happen and we're disappointed with. But whatever it is, in the center of it is this conflict. And what we do in this 6-part conflict resolution model is that we look at that conflict in the center and we begin to ask ourselves, how has what happened to us in our past, our experiences, our personality, our beliefs, how does that shape the way that I see the conflict? And also, how does what I'm going through in my present, if I'm really nervous at work or have a lot on my plate, or things are not going well in my life, can I tell you that the conflict is worse because things aren't going for me that well in the present? So we have the conflict in the center that is shaped by the past and the present. What we began talking about yesterday is the reaction, because oftentimes when a conflict occurs, the first thing that happens is my reaction. It's my automatic thought, feeling, or action in response to that conflict. The problem for most of us is we get stuck in that reaction, and it becomes this loop that drags us down and does not allow us to learn, grow, and heal. So it was so important yesterday that we figure out the signals and the signs that when you're in that reaction period, so that we can pull you out of it. But here's the thing. As we help you to pull out of it, I told you a second ago that we want to get you from a reaction to a response. A response is the same thing, thoughts, feelings, and actions, but it's considered thoughts, feelings, and actions. It's a choice. It is not something that happens without thought, but we think about it, even if it's for a second. Here's the beauty. What's between our reaction and between our response, that intermediate thought, is the result that we want. So let's say I have an issue with my cousin, and I'm thinking, my reaction is she hurt my feelings and I want to pop off about it. And I say to myself, is that the result? What is the result that I want? Well, the result I want is what outcome? Well, I want my cousin to treat me nice. Well, I have no control over that. Guess what? You have no control over that. So a result is something that I can control. And what I can control is the way I come into a situation. And so my result that I want is I want to show her the peace of God that is within me. I want to show her love, because even though we might not get along in the moment, she's been there for me throughout my life. So the result that I want is what I want to show her and bring to the relationship. So instead of popping off, my response is, hey, this is how, when you said that, this is what I'm thinking you're saying. Am I understanding it correctly? I might ask her a question. I might respond to her with love. I might do anything, but it's different than my initial reaction, which is to fight, because I've been fighting all my life. Not good. All right. So I've shared with you this whole idea of the conflict resolution model that we have, that we want to really stand back and take a look at the conflicts that we are dealing with. So what did I say coming into 2025? That we come into 2025 with these visions and these goals, and oh my goodness, just like every other year, I want to do a new thing. I absolutely want this to be the best year ever. I say that every single year. Studies show that by the 10th, which is tomorrow, most people have thrown away those resolutions and all those things that they said they were going to do and put them on the back shelf. We don't want that, because we come into the year with great expectations and great potential. So what we want to say is, we have these goals, but now for the first time ever, I'm going to anticipate what might go wrong with that. And so the minute I get discouraged, how do I tend to think, feel, and act? Because now I need to be able to arrest that. So I asked you the question at the very beginning, are you trigger happy or trigger sad? And what I meant by that is this idea that some of us are always triggered. And we're always triggered in a way, oftentimes, that's pulling us down, which is trigger sad. You think it's trigger happy because we do it so much, but that trigger is making us sad. And so what we want to do as part of this process is to figure out what the triggers are. We started off the conversation today asking this question, are we creatures of habit? And my question for you is, yes, are you a creature of habit? Do you do things the same way? Well, if you do, we've got to figure out some new habits. But in order to do that, we've got to figure out what the triggers are. And so with that, we have our question for today. The question for today is another piece of that conflict model, but I absolutely want to show you that we've got to peel the layers of the onion so that we figure out, I know how I react, but I need to figure out what triggers that reaction. So now, folks, we are going back to the source. If we know what the source is, now we can create a plan to deal with the source. We've got to deal with the source. And so if we are creatures of habit, this is what I found working with many, many clients, that sometimes it's the same things that trigger us. It might be a different person who does something to me, but it's the same underlying cause that triggers me. And so for that reason, I want to introduce you not just to the question, but also to my initial answer, so you can see how I kind of walk through this process, so I can walk you through it. So we're talking about this conflict resolution model, and the center is conflict, and that's what we're about to talk about right now. In order to deal with that conflict, what I'm showing you is first my question, which is day number 9. Remember, you're going to go to your worksheet, and on day number 9, you're going to write what issues or situations are likely to trigger me or make me spiral down. Now, remember, when I do mine, I make it me statements instead of you, but what issues or situations are likely to trigger you or make you spiral down? So I want to share with you my answers, just being vulnerable. These are my initial answers. I'm going to give it some more consideration today. But initially, what I wrote is this: when I feel disrespected, looked down on, or overlooked. I have this thing, like I grew up, there's always a why to things. And for me, I grew up feeling a lot of times that I was less than other people, and really feeling like other people were looking down on me when sometimes it was me. So that takes a lot of work in coaching, but I'm just saying, I found that one of my triggers is when people kind of disrespect me or treat me as less than, or maybe even invisible. It triggers those bad things that I talked about the day before, those things like isolating myself or snapping or whatever. The second trigger I wrote was when I see injustice or people being mistreated. And I remember as a small child watching things like Roots or historical pieces and taking it to heart and really crying. And it's something that has followed me my whole life. It's a trigger. And I don't know if it'll ever stop being a trigger, but I can deal with it right away, as opposed to letting it be a lasting detriment for me. The third thing I put down is when I have way too much to do or no help/relief. That's a trigger for me. And then the fourth thing I put is when my children or those close to me are hurting. I'm mama bear, and I will get triggered by that. So I'm giving you examples of my answer. What I'm asking you to do when you're asking yourself those questions, what situations or issues tend to trigger you, I want you to think to 2 to 4 things that are the most prevalent for you. Now, I wrote those 4 things down. Now I'm going to spend the day thinking about it and say, no, maybe not this one, but I'm going to add that one. So I may add some by the end of the day. But this is one that I think is really important, that I reach out to other folks and I say, because people know those days when they see, my cousin tends to say, she'll talk to me and she sees that red curtain come down, and that red curtain is that fire, like I'm about to go off. Now, I don't do that, or maybe I do. Ask my sons. But I'm going to say that asking someone else, like, what things do you think trigger me? Why? Because sometimes we can't see it all. And from someone else's external vantage point, they absolutely can say, wow, this is something that I notice about her. Now, here's the thing. If you ask people for feedback like that, be willing to hear it. One of the things that we talk about in this program is wholehearted communication. And that's this idea that with wholehearted communication, that we speak our truth and we also are able to listen to other people's truth. And so when I learned to do that with my sons, can I tell you that when they told me their truth, sometimes I had to say, I can't talk about that right now. And I needed to process it because it hurt my feelings. But in every case, I was better because of it. It doesn't mean that I agreed totally with their truth, but I absolutely needed to hear it in order to hear their heart and connect with them in a deeper way. So if you ask somebody, well, what things trigger me? Let's not get upset about it. Let's take it in and say, wow, I didn't realize that, or wow, that's helpful, because those people around you have absolutely an opportunity to make you better. So any questions about the question for today or any thoughts? If you have any questions or thoughts, put it in the comment. I just want to say I thank Judy for saying she liked my quote from The Color Purple. I try to be funny once in a while, and I know I'm not. My sons tell me that, but that's okay too. But if you have any questions or any thought about the question of the day, please share that. And I'm always going to remind you always that you do have the Facebook group that you can go in and you can share your thoughts and your ideas. It is a safe space. One of the things that we specialize in the Whole Heart Center is just creating this safe space that we can be vulnerable. I often say to the coaches that work with us, nobody likes a perfect coach. Nobody likes a perfect friend. And so we don't want people who do everything right. We want people who have the ability to say, I don't know, this happened and I'm still trying to process it and I'm making my way through it, because those are the real people. And I love to surround myself with real people, with real issues, with real hearts. So having said that, I want to leave you with one final thing. And that is that it's day 9. You made it through 9 days. And we're making it to the day 10 tomorrow when they say people throw their ideas out the window. We already know that we're not doing that. We are creating this beautiful community. As we do that, I just want to thank you for all the Facebook comments that you're making, all of the emails and the things that are and conversations I'm having with folks. This is something that is changing us as a Whole Heart team, because it's just a great way for us to connect as human beings. And so we are honored to do this 21 days with you. And we are thankful that you are giving us encouragement and feedback and things that make us better. We appreciate that. So that being said, I guess I have to let you go. I will be back with you tomorrow. And I just thank every single person who joined us today. And if you get a chance before you log off, just say, see you later. And I will see you tomorrow.